Hi, everyone. I'm Teri.
And I'm Ella. Welcome to the Chasing Red Flags podcast. Let's get real. Here, no topic is off limits.
And real beats perfect every time.
Welcome to the conversation.
Welcome to where you belong.
You're part of the family now, so let's get real together. Hi, Mama. I miss you.
Sweetheart, I miss you too.
As much as I'm really excited to see your face and I love you so much, I am more excited because A, we're on a time crunch, but B, because I'm so excited to be interviewing our guest today. So I just got to say it straight off the bat.
I know. I feel the same way, just so you know. I'm so excited to see your face. I haven't seen you all day, but as much as I love you and miss you, I'm ready for today's guest, and I'm excited.
Very excited. But before we actually introduce today's guest, we just want to say thank you so much for being here. We truly appreciate your support. Whether you're listening for the first time or you are our day one listener, please subscribe to the Chasing Red Flags podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to yours. And please subscribe to the YouTube channel to watch all of the episodes. All right, Mom, take it away and let's introduce.
Okay. So today we're joined by an incredible guest who's sure to leave a lasting impact, Jackie Goldschneider. In her new book, she opens up about her decades-long battle with anorexia. I know, we're both like,
we love it.
And her very public journey to recovery. Her honesty is so inspiring. I also actually just want to take a moment to recognize that this is an emotional topic and a sensitive topic. So if you feel it might be triggering for you, please take care of yourself while you listen.
As someone recovering from a different eating disorder, which I've shared on some previous episodes, after reading her book, I know that this is going to be such an incredibly important conversation on so many different levels.
And for anyone listening that might think, I don't have an eating disorder or I don't know anyone with disordered eating, Jackie's book is about feeling alone, losing yourself in something toxic, and finding your way out. And everyone can relate to that in some way or another. We're honored to introduce today's guest. She is a star of The Real Housewives of New Jersey, a mother of 2 sets of twins, a former corporate lawyer, and the author of the extremely impactful book, The Weight of Beautiful. Please welcome Jackie Goldschneider to the podcast.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We're so excited. Before we dive in, we want to say happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
We know
I'm not a birthday person.
Neither am I. We were just
I become an introvert on my birthday, so I just wanted to be away with my family.
Perfect.
And it was great.
Sounds exactly like with the two of us and what we like to do.
Yeah.
And it's such a small world. My incredible, brilliant college friend, Brandy, introduced the two of us. So
yeah, she was my law school friend.
very lucky. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here, so I'm just going to get right into it. Your book details your 18-year struggle with anorexia. Ella and I both read it cover to cover. And I just have to say, I cried on and off throughout the entire thing. The way you were so vulnerable and so real on every single page is incredibly brave. As a fellow mom, I just want to say thank you for your honesty. I think you're going to help a million trillion people out there. How did you find the strength to be so brave?
It was my closest kept secret for a very long time. And I wouldn't even let anybody broach the subject with me. So I never thought I'd be talking about it. But once I decided to recover, all of these secrets felt like poison. And I just kept thinking about all the ways I tortured myself and how I ruined all these special occasions and what I might have done to my children. And then I said, I got to get these thoughts out of my head. So it felt so good to let go of everything. So it was almost like, I know that it's helping other people, but it was like a selfish need to get it all out of my head and somewhere else. So it didn't just poison me anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. And I know exactly like that feeling. I personally am just so grateful on how real you are in your book. I feel like I was reading it from a few different angles, like looking back and like really reflecting, because I've read it more than once. So like going through it again, I look at it from a lot of different angles. First, as somebody who is 3 years now into recovery from an eating disorder. Second, as a daughter, thinking about it, how hard it must have been for my mom and my dad to go through that. And then also like there is the perspective of somebody who might not fully get how much hiding something that big can mess with like you mentally and physically, of course. And I just feel like you're so raw in the book. And I'm just kind of wondering, are there any moments where you second guessed sharing certain stories about what you were going through?
Oh yeah, definitely a few of them. What was really hard for me was talking about the ways it might have impacted my children. I almost didn't write the chapter about the ways that I fed my children when they were babies. I thought, if you don't understand what an eating disorder is, it's really hard to comprehend. And so I felt like as hard as it is to comprehend an eating disorder in general, doing it to your kids is just something. I knew that some people would see me as a monster, and I didn't want that, but I knew that I was not alone in this, and I wanted other moms or dads to know that it's never too late to stop, and that your kids really are impacted by the way they see you behave around food. So, that chapter was very hard for me to write and to share.
It was incredibly brave, and actually so impactful as a mom, and I think impactful for all other parents that are going to read it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it made me sad though, because I know that I destroyed a lot of good times, and that was one of them, parenting my kids. I mean, it should have been fun to feed. I mean, I had fun. I mean, I loved having babies, but feeding them took on a whole new meaning when you don't know how to feed yourself. I tortured myself during their meals, and it was really hard.
I can relate. And I just feel like, especially as a kid, it's like, as I'm reading the book, it's hard not to go back in my head and think about my own childhood and our family eating habits and comments made over the years that kind of just stuck in my head with me. And I feel like you talk a lot about food being love, and that food was a way that your working mom showed you love, when she got home. Do you feel like that mindset maybe set you up for what later came as your disordered eating?
Yeah, I think, our past is what it is. And my mother came from, not only did she alleviate some of her guilt through feeding us, but she also, her parents were Holocaust survivors, and they never had enough food, and they lived in a refugee camp, and then they were in Israel, and there was, everything was rationed. And she came from a childhood where when you had access to food, you ate it all. Right. And she never let go of that mindset. So not only was she alleviating guilt, she was also kind of well, we have food, let's eat it all. We were always kind of raised to believe that leftovers was a waste. So just finish everything,
Which is totally understandable based on
absolutely.
So I until I developed my actual eating disorder, starting from when I was a teenager, I was really had disordered eating, which is a different thing, but I think that mindset definitely taught me not to eat based on hunger, but to eat based on emotion.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. It's very relatable. Very.
And you being in college, I didn't have an eating disorder when I was in college, but I was certainly disordered, and I was up and down and tortured. And so this is not exclusive to people who have a categorical bulimia or binge eating disorder. I mean, even my college years were torture, and that wasn't an eating disorder. The way that I hated gaining weight and compared myself to everyone. And I'm sure there's a million girls around you who do all of that,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All
absolutely. The time. All the time. Yes. It's definitely, I talk about it with my friends a lot because they know what I've been through. So they've been amazing. But I think it's definitely something that, especially in college, is always on girls and boys as well as mine. And that is so sad.
Yeah.
But going on more about your book, I called my mom and I was bawling my eyes out after reading about the bullying that you and your brother Eric experienced when you moving to New Jersey.
Yeah.
No, it was,
I cried every time I reread that chapter.
Every time. And I've read this book 3 times, and I literally, that chapter just So I know that was kind of like when you moved to New Jersey for your freshman year of high school. Could you kind of talk a little bit maybe about how that experience impacted you and contributed to the feelings of the self-loathing?
Yeah, that was probably the most impactful years in terms of setting me up for anorexia, because the connections I made between weight and loneliness didn't leave me for a very long time. So I moved my freshman year of high school. I moved to a new town. I moved to a development that had no homes except for mine. The rest were being built. My parents both worked full time. I didn't have a license. And so and I have great parents. I'm super close with them. But I think they thought they were doing something great by letting us live in a bigger house, taking us out of Staten Island. Right. And I was so lonely. And entering high school, as I was already a little bit chubby, I had bad hair. I started gaining weight really quickly. I had a disabled brother. It was not a recipe for, being Miss Popularity. And I had no friends. I really didn't. I had like one or two fleeting friends. But I just really, as I gained weight, the more weight that I gained, because I would come home and I had nowhere to go. I had nothing to do. I would just eat and study and eat and study. And the heavier I got, the more upset I got, the more I hated myself. And I just really connected weight gain with loneliness. And I just wanted to be somebody else so badly. Like I would watch people all day and watch the popular girls and just say, God, if I was thin, I'd be so happy. And that never left me. So when I finally figured out how to be thin, I didn't want to let go of it. So those years definitely were so, instrumental in setting me up for this connection between being thin and being happy.
Right. So for me, when I hear that, it's just, as a mom, it's so hard to hear, your book touches on obviously the feelings of shame and not measuring up to other girls and feeling less than. These are things that Ella and I hear from girls every day, in DMs. And those emotions obviously lead to so many struggles, whether it's eating disorders or anxiety or depression.
Yeah.
What advice do you give to someone right now who's dealing with those feelings?
Yeah, I mean, diet culture is out of control.
Out of control.
And so there's nothing I can really say that's going to negate everything that you see on social media and all around you. I mean, and it's not just exclusive to young girls. Like a lot of people around me are on diet drugs. They're all like withering away. So there's nothing I can really say except that you have to. So you can't change society right now. I'm not going to change society just by talking to you. But you can work on yourself, really realize that no one's thinking about your weight the way that you are, first of all. No one who truly loves you is going to look at what you weigh as whether or not they want to keep you in their lives. So weight, I mean, I'm not an advocate for being obese. I'm like fat positive, but I'm not advocating obesity. I'm just saying, like, finding that balance in yourself is going to lead to so much more happiness than torturing yourself with food. Absolutely. And that's something it took me a very long time to realize. I did gain weight. I don't weigh myself, so I don't really know. But I measure by my clothes. But like, I did gain weight, and it is hard sometimes. But when I'm eating with my family, when I'm enjoying with my friends, and I'm not thinking about food, and I'm really tasting things and loving things, God, what it contributes to my life is so much more than what being emaciated could ever do for you. I mean, it's just, eating disorders are just a 1,000 times over not worth it. It's so much better on the other side.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I have to say, I love that you say you don't weigh yourself. And I know that's a very sensitive topic for people, but I went through, after mom, like finding out about my eating disorder and finding me throwing up and my treatment, one of my doctors actually every week would make me weigh myself when I would go to therapy. And that was very triggering for me. because then it was more like it continued to focus it more on weight than trying to get better. And I really didn't like that. So I think it's an amazing thing to be able to just feel and enjoy and eat and be happy with the people that you're surrounded with and not have to worry about
Well, I mean, you don't stop worrying about it because you're still finding...
Yes, it's always in the back of my mind.
Well, but also that's not the only external measure of validation.
Absolutely.
You know, like you still have your clothing, you still have your... I mean, there's been times when I'm like, well, I'm not weighing myself. That's great. Maybe I'll take a measuring tape and measure my waist just so I can make sure. You know, you have to get rid of all of that. You know, and I still haven't. You know, I still put on my clothes and I'm like, is this tighter? Is this looser? I don't hate myself for it, but it's hard. I don't think anyone ever gets rid of all of that. You know, that's a society that we live in. But with weighing yourself, you know, numbers were really triggering for me.
It's the numbers that was...
You can't hate a number that you don't know. You know?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And everyone's body is different. So I just feel like that's not something that you can measure. But I will say, when I read the conversation that you had with your doctor, that was literally, as much as I was just so angry for you because that conversation, I don't know, but you said like it had a very big impact on you. Can you kind of tell our listeners about what he said and how that became like a turning point?
Yeah. Well, when I was a senior in high school, and I was getting my
so upsetting.
My physical for to go away to college. It was in April of '94, and my doctor made me weigh myself. And I always used to turn around on the scale because I just didn't want to know. I knew I was obese. I didn't want to know, and he told me that I had to turn around and look at the number. And then he made me feel so awful about myself. Now, listen, this was 30 years ago. Things are not like they are now. I don't know if a doctor could get away with saying that to a young girl now. But basically, he told me I was too fat to go to college, that I wasn't going to have fun, and that I should go to Weight Watchers. And, you know, Weight Watchers, I think, has done... I got a lot of pushback on this because I think Weight Watchers has done... Well, I got a mix because as many people would say that Weight Watchers has done great things for them and taught them how to eat in moderation, a lot of people will tell you it was their gateway drug to anorexia. It teaches you... For me, it taught me how to equate food with numbers and how to eat as a mathematical equation instead of for nourishment and enjoyment. It didn't teach me moderation. It taught me how to play a game with food.
Right.
And I got the minute and I say this in the book, I sat in that meeting because, listen, my mom was an immigrant. My dad never knew from dieting. And so I had no one in my life who knew about like healthy eating, who would help me. Like I help my kids, you know,
of course.
But no one ever said to me, hey, Jackie, like if you want to lose some weight, let's try like reducing the carbs. Let's go to the gym a little more. Nobody said that to me. So I had no idea how to do any of this. I remember sitting in that meeting and had this colorful brochure in my hand. And I remember thinking, my God, someone's telling me exactly how to get skinny, and I'm going to do it so good. I'm going to do it so great. Everyone's going to regret treating me so bad. I'm going to prove everyone wrong. And I ran. It was the last day of my life that I was ever not on a diet until I recovered. And I just remember thinking, oh God, like I don't want to eat anymore. I want to eat as little as possible. Now, I didn't develop full-blown anorexia until, this is when I was 17 years old. I didn't develop full-blown anorexia until I was 26 years old. But this set me up to be such a yo-yo dieter, you know, and always count calories.
When you say mathematical equation, for those listening that truly don't understand what you're saying, can you explain what that means?
Right. Yes. So the Weight Watchers system back then, I don't know how it is now, and I know it's evolved, but back then there was, the way that it worked was you got a certain number of points that you could use per day for dairy, for bread, for fruit, for all that kind of stuff.
And you were literally counting points.
Yeah, so I started on a program called Quick Start, which I don't think would be legal today. And it was basically a starvation diet. And you could have very little food. You could have all the vegetables you want, which was another setup for life. So I went straight to the supermarket from that meeting, and I got the blandest food you could imagine. And I mean, by the end of that week, I was I filled a spray bottle with water, and I took cornflakes and saccharin and a spray bottle, and I would just make them mushy and put artificial sweetener on top and eat it until I wasn't starving anymore. And
it didn't even taste good.
Oh yeah, God. And if I was hungry, I was eating like raw cabbage. I just did. But when I got back to that meeting after the first week, I lost 9 pounds.
Right. So you got your bonus of
you were getting the
something
result.
And it was another connection between starvation and happiness,
right.
So I formed all these connections in my adolescent brain, which, is still developing, and they just stuck with me. And there was nobody to tell me this isn't healthy. I didn't tell my parents what I was doing. And the positive reinforcement, of course, was amazing. Yeah. People were like, wow, you look great, right. And I went away to college 50 pounds lighter in just a few months. And it was life-changing. There were boys paying attention to me for the first time. And I wasn't thin because I started, well over 200 pounds. But I definitely
getting all that attention
normal.
From doing something
absolutely.
Negative. You didn't see it as a negative.
Yes.
Yeah. And then college was torture because, I was out in the wild,
That was my question is you wrote in college about killing your appetite throughout like college at Boston University. And I have to say, shout out Boston.
Shout out Boston.
Yes. And I think that's when it continued when you moved to New York for law school. And then that kind of like affected you on dates when you met your husband. But for me personally, what really hit me was when you talked about how difficult it was to even take like a bite of your own wedding cake.
Oh yeah. I didn't even want it. My head was so warped by then. I mean,
did you realize that something serious was going on at that point?
Yes, but I didn't really let myself acknowledge it. I did. I knew that what I was doing didn't feel good. Yeah. But I didn't think, when you're young, you think you're invincible. Yeah. You don't think anything's going to happen to you. So in my head, it was like, I always just wanted to keep doing it until the next thing. And then the next thing would come and I wasn't ready. So I kept just telling myself, okay, like
I did the same thing.
I know that diets aren't that great for you, but
I'll just do it.
I'm just going to do it until the wedding is over.
Right.
Or until the honeymoon's over, until I have kids, or until they're in school, or until, and it just never stopped. So I did know that it wasn't good for me, but I always just thought it was a temporary thing.
Right.
Okay.
After your wedding, you started a family. But as you shared in your book, anorexia remained a central focus, in your life. So I'm sure there's people listening that don't quite understand what you mean because they don't think twice about eating when they're hungry. So in your life, simple meals at that point became incredibly arduous and difficult for you.
Yeah. I mean, I settled into what I call functional anorexia. It was like I knew how to do it. I didn't have to think about it. And there was just no question in my mind that I was going to eat how I wanted to eat.
Yeah.
And no one was going to stop me. And if anyone, it's hard to say something to someone.
Very.
So people generally, like 90% of the time, didn't say anything. But once in a while, someone would push me, just try it. Just take one bite. Just try it. They don't understand that anorexia is very black and white. And it's like one bite means the start of a spiral in my head. Yep. So I wouldn't even take one bite of anything. So I would have those very uncomfortable conversations sometimes where I'd have to tell somebody I'm not taking a bite. Right. I don't want any. And that was difficult. But in a day-to-day, I had kind of settled into this way of eating that I told myself, it was a choice that I had to make every day. And I was making the choice to keep myself thin because that's what made me happy. And I didn't care about food. Food became my enemy. And it's not hard to not want to engage with your enemy, right?
Yes.
I didn't enjoy it. It didn't feel good. Eating food to me, afterwards, I felt so bad and so guilty that it wasn't worth it.
Well, that was for me. I mean, I had bulimia. So I would binge eat and then I would feel that bad about myself and then I would want to throw it all up. So that feeling makes a lot of sense. But I remember you said you kind of had like, you froze your food so the meals would like last longer or like it became like a torturous experience for you.
Yeah. Well, I just didn't care.
That.
I didn't care about food. I cared about two things. I cared about not being hungry because being hungry was painful. Sometimes I enjoyed the feeling of hunger because I knew it meant I was doing something right. But other times it was really hard for me to be hungry. I'd be lightheaded. I didn't feel good. Especially after having kids, and I have a thyroid disorder. So it all like would mix together. Yeah. And I also sometimes just wanted to enjoy the process of eating something.
Right.
So if I froze my food, it would take me a lot longer to eat it so I can enjoy it for a lot longer.
That's heartbreaking, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then I also, the part to me in the book that really, gets to your heartstrings was when you went on your trip to Mexico.
Yeah, that was the worst.
Can you explain that to our listeners and what you went through? Because that was heartbreaking to read, honestly.
Yeah. So anorexia is a full-time job. And you have to constantly think about what is available to eat and make sure it's something that you're comfortable eating. So because of Weight Watchers, I became really uncomfortable eating anything that I didn't know the values of. So I'd walk around with like literally an encyclopedia. I brought an encyclopedia, a 900-page encyclopedia on my honeymoon.
Ella, do you know what an encyclopedia is? Just asking.
Mom, I know what it is.
They don't have those anymore.
I forgot that everything's online
We're
now.
much older than she is, Jackie.
I swear.
Yeah, we had flip phones back then.
A whole different world.
So
yes, I do.
I got really uncomfortable eating anything I didn't know the value of. So I would call ahead to restaurants and I would make sure that they could make me something steamed, no oil, nothing extra. I made sure they had a vegetable I was familiar with, a fish I was familiar with. But when I called the hotel in Mexico, they explained to me that it's an all-inclusive hotel. Yep. And that they don't change the meals, that only if I'm allergic to something they'll change, but they don't change the style of cooking. They could just take out an ingredient. And I just didn't know what to do. I was beside myself. I couldn't cancel the trip. So I got, they made these pre-mixed that I used to have for lunch every day, these pre-mixed like 70-calorie tuna things. And I bought 36 of them. I packed them in my suitcase. And I would just take them in my bag with me to meals. And then I'd order a salad. My poor husband was used to it by then. And in the middle of meals, I used to just go into the bathroom and eat my stuff and then come back and pick at the dry salad. And I was so blinded. Yes. However, I was, people don't understand that anorexia, bulimia, all of this is a mental illness. And anorexia is actually the most deadly mental illness.
Trying to explain.
And I think that's one of the main reasons that I wrote this book is because I wanted people to understand why all the times that my mother would say, let me just cook you something. Or my husband would be like, let's go out to dinner tonight and we'll both let go. We'll both just have fun. It doesn't work like that because there's just so much mental trauma in the way. So,
and so much control, it's really about control, which is what Ella and I learned in therapy.
There was also I felt so clean. Because for so many years, I felt like dirty being fat. Yes. I just felt like no one liked me. No one wanted me around them. And I felt there was something gross about me. And it must have been my weight is what I told myself. I felt I was all skin and bones. Like when I would suck in my stomach, my hip bones would just there was like nothing there. Right. And I felt so good sometimes, which is sick.
Right.
I felt in control. I felt clean. I felt like I had willpower that nobody else had.
That's the control.
It's the power.
So it was very hard to in reality, I was killing myself.
Right.
Yeah, but you don't want to get rid of that feeling.
Right. And I didn't let myself see the bad parts. So for me, it was a balance. It was like, yeah, okay, I can't have a delicious meal, but guess what? I'm the thinnest person at the pool. And guess what? I'm wearing a size 00 to dinner tonight. And that felt good because it was all I wanted for so long.
Well,
you know,
when you talk about Evan, you know, in the book and just, you know, from social media, obviously you explain that Evan has been a huge support system to you, which obviously is incredible as a husband. And he's been your cheerleader all along. So for those who haven't read your book and might be wondering, which I understand, how did he not take action, right? Watching you go through all this. Can you share how he first brought up your disordered eating and why he didn't after that?
Yeah. Evan tried at the beginning. Nobody tells you how to do this stuff, you know, especially as a man who's never had any kind of history in his family or any exposure to any of this. It's just so foreign to him. And nobody teaches you what to do when your spouse is, you know, hurting themselves. And especially as an adult, you can't just check your spouse in somewhere, you know, with a child, you can. But he tried to bring it up several times. And he would say, you know, like, are you sure that's all you want to eat? You know, do you want to both like go get some of this and we'll both eat it? Because he's regimented too. I mean, obviously not in an eating disorder kind of way. But he would try gently, and I was so angry when someone would try to help me because I didn't want the help.
Right.
I didn't want anyone telling me that I was doing something wrong, and I didn't want the help. And I would bite his head off. Like, I wasn't nice about it. And after so many times that someone says, no, leave me alone.
You shut down.
You have to leave them alone. There's nothing else you can do. It was either leave me or try to check me in somewhere or just, you know, let me live and see what happens, you know. We had 4 kids. I mean, he's not going to send me away at that point, you know. So, you know, plus I was living with it, you know. After I had kids, and this is a difficult part because anorexia is not what they show you in the movies. It's not just emaciated wearing a winter coat in the summer. It's like you can look pretty normal and still have a raging eating disorder, especially bulimia.
So for those of you listening, please hear that.
I will say I looked completely healthy and I was at my worst, and it was my blood pressure, like everything. Like I would get checked by the doctor and it was not healthy, but I looked completely normal.
Yeah. So that's the difficult thing is because I kind of settled in at a higher weight. I was still tiny, but I was no longer a 00. Now I was a 0. And you know, there's many women walking around, especially in the tri-state area, who are a size 0 in their 40s. And so, you know, I look thin. And if you watched me, you knew I had a problem. But in general, I kind of looked like the bottom end of normal. So it was very easy to say, okay, she's doing fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Did you, besides obviously your husband, did you shut anyone else out, including like friends, to protect your secret?
Yeah, I mean, around the time of my wedding was when I was so emaciated. And my parents would try to talk to me about it, but they're from a different generation too.
Yeah, generationally, it's very different.
It's so hard.
Very different. Yeah.
And they don't know
and
they're
they
saying the wrong thing when they're saying.
Of course. Well, actually, the wrong thing when you're so caught up in this disease, it's flattering. You know, so when my parents would call me and cry and say, I remember my mom used to tell me that my arms looked like I just walked out of a concentration camp.
Oh.
And I was like, oh my God, I love that. I loved it because it meant I was doing it right. So I didn't hear their concern. I would just hear, what I wanted to hear.
Praise
and plus my parents had their own issues. I was like, leave me alone. You got your own stuff, I don't bug you. And I just, I almost welcomed the concern because
it gave you
in the back of my head, well, not only did it give me attention, but in the back of my head, I kind of stored it as if I ever did want to recover, there are people who care.
Right.
And beyond that, it didn't matter to me what anyone said. I was so black and white. There's no gray areas. It didn't matter.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand why you can't make somebody get help. Like, you have to choose to get help on your own. Is there anything anyone has, like, in your life could have said to you to maybe stop you from going through this, or not really?
Yes. So first of all, I think it's important that people talk about it, which is why I wrote a book about it. Because when I was at my worst, I remember there was nobody, no public figures. No, listen, I know what I am. I'm on a reality show. It's not like I'm Jennifer Aniston, but I am still a public voice, right?
Absolutely.
And when I was
to me,
struggling,
you are.
when I was struggling, I really wanted to know that somebody had stopped their eating disorder, recovered, and didn't turn into like a lonely, like terrorized monster,
right?
Yes.
And because in my head, that's what happened. I was always convinced that if I recovered, I'd go back to who I was in high school.
Exactly.
And this is when I'm like still like 40 years old. I still never lost that connection. Yeah. So I wanted to just know. And there was nothing out there except Portia de Rossi, who was on Ally McBeal. She wrote a book, and I read it over and over and over again, looking just for some kind of like, not even support, but like a guide for like, okay, when I decided to stop, this is what made me decide to stop. And this is how it went. And this is where I am now. And there was none of that. It was an amazing book. And it definitely described all the things I was doing. Right. And at the end, it was like, and then I met Ellen and I came out of the closet and I felt so good and I started intuitively eating, the end. And I was like, but wait a second. What if you're not hiding your sexuality? Like, what if there's something, what do I do? How do I get there? And there was none of that. And so I would tell people, like, start having the conversation. Talk to somebody you trust or talk to somebody who's recovered. I talk to 1 million people all the time. I talk to people's kids. I talk to people themselves. Like, I talk all the time because I want people to know that it is entirely yes. I want them to have a pathway, like a guide for how to get there.
Right.
And I do think that it can be a moment, because for me it was a moment. Yeah. Like, I don't think it has to be a slow burn of like, I'm getting tired of this, or like suddenly you have osteoporosis. I don't think it has to be that. Like, for me, it was like, I started having these like little moments where I'd see people doing stuff and I'm like, I do that. I don't want to do that anymore.
You had your moments, Ella.
Yeah. And then I was just found myself on the floor with an injury, and I was like, I just don't want to do it anymore.
Well, as you talk about,
go ahead,
Ella.
I just have to say, from moments, like, I had moments leading up to my big moment that made me be like, I need to stop. Like, I just kept feeling like I knew that I kept looking up the symptoms of what like bulimia would do to your body. And that started to scare me.
She realized she could die.
I realized I could die. I realized the lining of my heart could thin and I could have a heart attack, and like all of my teeth could decay, like all of those things. And then I think obviously like my really big moment was when like mom walked in on me literally throwing up in the bathroom. And that's when it hit me that I was like, I cannot do this anymore. Like, it is not okay. And not okay, but it's not healthy. I don't want to die.
And as you talk about, Jackie, you talked about, resources and next steps for people. And I know you mentioned this, so I'm going to mention it, that the NETA website has a screening tool.
Oh, yeah, it's
that
great.
helps
Yes.
determine if someone needs support. And I did go on there to see what it was before we got on here. And I think it's so important that everyone knows that. And we're going to have that linked on the Chasing Red Flags website. We actually already have it linked, and also in the show notes of this, so people can get that resource.
Yeah, the National Eating Disorder Association.
And with your book, right? It's in here too.
Yeah, it's at the end. They are an amazing resource. I didn't even know that resources, like I knew of their website, but I was scared to ever really look there
Of course.
until I was ready. But they have a screening tool that you could use to see if you really are in a danger zone or someone you love is. They have links to all kinds of resources. I would encourage. So if somebody is struggling and they don't know what to do, I would encourage them to talk to somebody they trust and love, because it's much better to have someone helping you.
Right.
To go on the National Eating Disorder website and to speak to their doctor, to ask people who you trust to help lead you in the right direction. And a lot of this stuff is covered by insurance, but I am a strong believer that you need not just a dietitian. So there's a difference, just for people listening, between dietitians and nutritionists, right? So a dietitian is a lot more intense, a lot more education goes into it. They're a lot more new. They know a lot more about this. Nutritionists are great, but you can become a nutritionist online in a matter of months.
Yep, absolutely.
I had the nutritionist.
You had a nutritionist at first. That's the one who weighed
me.
Yes.
I think that if I had the I think it would have been a lot.
Yes, and I'll tell you something about
process.
nutritionists is that a lot of people with eating disorders become nutritionists before they are recovered, while they are still struggling, because they're very obsessed with food and with nutrients and with diet, and they want to keep it in their life, and they think they're experts on it. They think they know how to lose weight. And so I would definitely recommend finding a dietitian who is trained in eating disorders, but also you have to work with a therapist at the same time, because, being that it's a mental illness, it's not just about somebody telling you the right nutrients to fix your health issues, which inevitably will be caused by your eating disorder. But you have to uncover the reasons why you would do this to yourself in the first place, or else it's never going to go away. So working with a team and the NEDA website can help you find people in your area.
Resource.
Yeah, they really are. They are.
So to transition a little bit, you've also been very open, and we're open in the book about your pregnancies.
Yes.
You have 4 children, 2 sets of twins. I'm still having a moment about that.
I know. We have a moment about it every time.
We talk about it, we're like 2 sets of twins.
I can't even imagine.
It's amazing. And I remember when they were little and we used to be out, people used to look at them and they're like, I'm trying to figure out the age difference in your kids.
Absolutely.
And I'd be like, you can't figure it out. Like, because they were close together too. Because after the first time, I got very scared that I'd never have another kid. I really wanted to try for a girl. So I was like, we have to do it now. So, my kids are only 2.5 years apart. So people would look at them.
4 kids.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah. So when they were like 5 and 3, people were like, I don't understand. Like, who's the oldest? Who's the youngest? Yeah.
So I gained over 60 pounds when I was pregnant with Ella. Let's try not to make a thing about that. And I remember how hard it was for me to lose the weight before getting pregnant again, because I kept saying in my head, I want to lose all my weight before I get pregnant again and gain possibly another 60 pounds. So I can only imagine how that intense stress was for you. Can you just talk quickly about your experience about having trouble getting pregnant, and then how you carried the anorexia throughout both your pregnancies?
Yeah. So I lost my period probably maybe a year into anorexia, maybe less. So, and I still have never gotten it back. I haven't had my period in 20 years. So
that's one of the side effects, Ella.
Yes. It's called amenorrhea.
I didn't realize that you might not get it back.
No, I didn't get it. I never got it back. Okay. And I didn't recover until I was in my mid 40s. And by then I was probably, premenopausal. So
yeah, that makes sense.
So I never got back my period. So I wasn't ovulating. So I needed help, and my we tried milder things, and then we went to IVF. And my first round of IVF, I got pregnant with twins, which was amazing. I, had a very hard line to find between eating enough for my children to be healthy and eating enough to stay anorexic. So I went to a prenatal nutritionist and I said, give me a guide for the minimum amount that I have to eat. And she looked at me like I was crazy and I didn't care. And so I ate the minimum amounts to make sure that 2 babies were getting the nutrients they needed. And it still, they had failure to grow inside. They still came out pretty early. And I didn't want to know how much of that was due to me because I was so sick.
But you're helping so many women who are going through the same thing, and clearly because they're doing that are so ashamed and in themselves and not speaking about it. So it's incredible.
It's not something to be ashamed of, but it is a problem. And it was a problem. And I don't know how much it contributed to them being premature, but they were in the NICU for a little while and they turned out fine. They just had to grow. They were tiny. And right after they were born, I went right back to anorexia. I mean, like immediately. And I couldn't wait. I mean, I say in the book, the same way that some people crave like sushi and wine, and I craved starving myself. Like I craved not eating. I just wanted to be thin again. I missed my body. It was really, really hard for me to not be thin anymore. And I lost the weight so quickly after the first ones. Second ones, I could not lose the weight.
Well, your kids are watching you model good behavior now, and they're going to read your book and see how incredibly brave you are. Yes. And all we can do in life is,
it's so inspiring.
Learn from our mistakes.
It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much.
I will say I'm 21 and I have seen obviously my mom fluctuate and complain about her weight just over the years being 21 years old. And I feel like, especially like, I don't know, Mom, like you became much more aware of like all of like the weight and talking about it after therapy
the way I
from my eating disorder. Absolutely. And I just feel like, especially in your book, like you talk about how your children like witnessed your disordered eating, and you said you'd have like a Diet Coke while they ate like a pizza. What is your like approach now?
Well, first of all, I never insult my body in front of my children. Ever, ever, ever.
As you should.
I'm very careful talking about weight with them. Yep. I talk more about just being healthy in general, eating in moderation. Yep. I really try to model great behaviors, but I am not fully recovered. I'm still got a little bit to go. Like I'm not anorexic at all anymore. I don't have an eating disorder anymore, but I have disordered habits that I have to get rid of. And food still scares me, So
no, it's very scary. I will say,
food scares
as a college
me.
student, I feel the same exact way.
Yeah. So I would say I'm probably like 80% recovered, but like, I had pizza when I went to Italy. I shared it with my son. It was amazing, but I haven't had it since.
Right.
I had birthday cake this year on my birthday, but like I don't eat cake in general. But I am a lot more relaxed around food. I never, ever take them out for food and don't eat it with them. So I try to model good behaviors, even if it's scary and painful for me, but I never insult myself in front of my kids, which I think is really important for moms to remember, especially in front of your daughters.
Absolutely. And I think before we had family therapy for Ella's eating disorder, she had a friend that came out of recovery, and I told her that she looked happy and healthy. And I later found out, which is still really devastating for me, because I was trying to use the right words, and it was before we had family therapy.
She didn't know I had the eating disorder at the time. So it was like a disconnect. And like, once we figured it out, like we realized
and I thought
that
saying
language.
Happy and healthy was a positive. So I read your book and now I comment obviously on people's nail color and their shirts and other things. But that was a very insulting or hard comment for her because she saw healthy as I was saying she was
you
fat.
gained weight. Yeah. Healthy when you have an eating disorder, healthy is one of the worst. And I remember, it's funny,
I'm telling everyone that's listening, it's important to hear because most people would think, oh, you look happy and healthy, and that's a compliment.
And I love you, Mom, but like you would have never known.
Right,
so
of course.
it
And
was
most
a
people
true,
don't
innocent
know.
mistake.
Yeah,
but
most
it's
people
just,
don't
like,
know.
from now how you move on and improve from that, you know?
I mean, I had a diastasis after the both sets of twins, which means that your abdominal muscles don't come back together the way that they're supposed to. So I looked, and plus I was very thin. So I looked about 4 to 6 months pregnant after I had kids. And I mean, you think healthy is bad. People used to ask me if I was pregnant all the time. And it was just
never ask
torture.
that question to another woman.
Torture for me. I walked into a class. I remember a mommy and me class with my with Jonas and with my older two one day, and a teacher congratulated me, and I was so upset. I said, I knew as soon as she said congratulations, I knew exactly what she was doing, and I wasn't pregnant. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. And it made me so sick to my stomach. I mean, but part of the reason I know that I'm recovered is because no matter what you say to me now, I know myself.
Right.
You could say to me, Jackie, you look, and I get these comments. This is the downside of being a public figure. I get all kinds of comments, and I get the people who are trolls who want to set you off that say, you might want to stop gaining weight, or you might want to put down the pizza.
Right.
And it doesn't affect me either way. I don't care because I know myself.
Because you know yourself now.
I know.
That's how you know you're recovering.
I know what I look like.
That's where it knows you've healed.
Yes. I know there's nothing you could say to me that would change the way I feel about myself because I know what I look like. I know who I am. And I know what my values are now. Yeah.
I love that.
I'm slowly getting there. I'm getting there, but I need to be in that level. It takes a lot of time.
Yours is more just now a confidence thing and not so much about your eating.
Yeah.
Your disorder.
Yeah.
And you're in a different phase of life. Like
being
for
in college
me,
is
it's like when I was in my 20s, I was like, well, I have to find a husband. I have to look good. I'm single. Now it's kind of like, I mean, you always want to be beautiful, but like I'm almost 50.
Yeah.
It's not really like
December 23rd, I'm turning 50.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
you look great. It's not like I'm going to start like modeling for Sports Illustrated. So I'm in a different phase of my life.
I mean, you could if you wanted to.
Oh, we'll see. I don't know about that.
So,
okay. I have to ask this, just because I have watched it. What was your motivation for going on The Real Housewives of New Jersey?
Yeah.
And I do have to say, like, were you terrified about hiding your eating disorder from everyone on the show because you were a public figure?
No. Well, I'll start with the second half of that question.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes.
I knew, my first question was, do you leave cameras at my house? Because it's not something that I could hide 24 hours a day. And once I realized that they don't leave cameras there, I know how to eat to fool people. So I would save everything for when I was in front of cameras during a meal. And I mean, you only film like 4 days a week, sometimes 5, but 4 or 5 days a week for a few hours.
You figured out how to maneuver around.
And to be honest with you, people don't really eat at the meals on the show. Like you order food, but most people just pick at it. Nobody's just like digging in and really like stuffing themselves,
So going on The Real Housewives, did you get a little bit of that external validation that you were looking for?
Yes. Well, so imagine that I came from this place where in high school, I was probably the least popular person you'd ever find. And I also had a hard time making close friendships in the suburbs. So when I moved from the city to the suburbs, I live in a great town, but I had problems finding friends because I was very insecure. I had a lot of babies, and I did have this mental illness that held me back a little bit. And suddenly, overnight, I became famous, and my friends became famous people, and I had a manager, and restaurants were sticking me in the back. So I remember saying, I used to be that person that would always like creak my head to see who was in the back of a restaurant, and now I was the person in the back of the restaurant. And like, it felt so like I never because I never got help, I never lost that trauma connection. So still 25 years after graduating high school, I was still going, you see that? You were wrong about me, and that felt so good to prove all those people wrong until in recovery, I realized they don't give a shit what I'm doing.
The external validation at that point was still so important to you.
But I was still so
but that
sick,
makes sense.
So yeah. And once I recovered, I started seeing it differently. No, I mean, I still love the show, but I certainly don't need it to feel good about myself.
Absolutely. And that's, and you shouldn't, but I just feel like in general, getting canceled and cancel culture is so terrifying. And I feel like that is part of the reason why we started chasing red flags, because we all have our own red flags, and one mistake often like destroys you, I feel like, which is why so many people are hiding their true selves. And I just feel like, as somebody with a big social following now, like, do you still feel that pressure these days?
I love having a platform because I'm using it for good stuff.
That's how we feel.
I use it. I work very closely with NEDA, with the National Eating Disorder Association. As much as I can do to let people know that they do not have to live with an eating disorder, I want to do. And having this platform is a gift. I also do a lot to help combat anti-Semitism, to keep the hostages top of mind. There was a hostage from my town, so it's important to me. So if you have a platform and you're not using it for good, then you don't deserve it. But yeah, I mean, this show has done amazing things by letting me.
When you told the producers of the show you wanted to go on the show, and
to recover on the show,
when you told the producers on the show that you wanted to talk about your eating disorder and get it out there, and be held accountable by the viewers
for exactly.
I thought that was incredible, to be honest.
There's no more authentic storyline that you can have. Yeah, and it was a very, very big hit.
I cried the whole time, like the whole. Like,
and I knew in the back of my head that liability-wise, I might have been setting myself up for a demotion, but I didn't. I had to save my own life because I had a lot of health issues at that point.
I agree. I think
I caused a lot of damage to my liver. I have been on hormone replacement for a very long time because I never got back my period. My body was completely depleted from estrogen. As you know, I could not get pregnant on my own. I needed many years of IVF. I had heart issues. I had blood pressure issues. I can't even tell you how many things that I had to, and a lot of them came restored, my health restored once I started eating again. But, you do mess yourself up. So.
Well, I feel like I was also kind of looking in a way to get, like, not caught, but like get help. Is like there was like the time I just left the door open so my mom would like hear me if I was throwing up, and like that's the moment where I had the turning point of like, okay, like I knew I needed help at this point.
Yeah, I would encourage anyone who is struggling to really tell someone you love and trust, who won't judge you. And ask them to help you find the resources, because there's a lot of eating disorder therapists out there. Mine is out of network, but I submit it to insurance. I get most of it back. Recovery is not just for, if you're rich or you have expendable income. Recovery is anyone can access it. And I would encourage them, tell someone you trust, look on the NEDA website, and start talking about it, because I like to say that secrets die in the light.
Right. Well, you have one daughter, and having daughters is hard because there's times that we do complain about our bodies, which is normal, and knowing the exact right words to say is often confusing. So what would your advice be to parents that are raising daughters?
Yeah, first of all, never insult yourself in front of them, because they internalize that.
Absolutely.
And don't label foods as good and bad. Always just encourage them to eat things that make them feel good, but in moderation. And model the good behaviors, because the kids watch you more than they listen to you. So model healthy behaviors. Encourage them to be outside for physical activity, and don't insult yourself. And make sure they know that they're loved regardless of their body size.
There needs to be more of an emphasis on building girls'
Yeah.
self-esteem, especially
yeah.
now with everything going on. Would you agree, Ella?
Well, I mean,
100%.
social media is just so hard.
It's the worst,
Yeah.
which is why we're trying to do the best we can with the platform we have.
Yes.
So I have to ask, the definition of anorexia, you've said, is artificially cutting off your hunger. You have been very outspoken about Ozempic.
Yes.
What is it that bothers you about it?
Oh, so many things. So I think that Ozempic is amazing if you are obese, if you have health issues where losing weight could really save your life.
Yep.
I think it's amazing. I think it's a very unregulated industry, which is horrible. People can get it walk into any med spa and get it from a nurse.
That's terrifying, actually.
Yeah, you can get it online.
I thought it was hard to get.
No, you can.
No.
I mean, they'll take your word for it, what your BMI is. And I think when you give it to people who don't need it, that's when you are creating eating disorders in people who don't have issues with food. So when somebody takes it because they want to lose 5 pounds, and they think it's the easy way to lose it, you're taking somebody who enjoys food and who has a good relationship with food, and you're teaching them how to not eat anymore. And then what's going to happen is you're stuck for life. And if you are okay being on this for life, then fine. But for someone like me, and for a lot of women that I know, studies show that you're going to want to come off of it after a little while. So most people only want to stay on these drugs for the maximum 2 years because for a number of reasons, you start to miss food or you don't like the effects. Also, you plateau, and you're spending all this money just to not lose weight anymore. A lot of people want to come off of it. When you come off of these drugs, two things happen. Your metabolism plummets because your body hasn't had food, but also your hunger comes back. I think they say 1.5 times what it was before. So you're ravenously hungry and your metabolism is so low that you gain back so much weight. And then you're going to have all these people who are just so desperate to lose weight.
And they don't know how because they don't have the medicine.
Exactly.
And that's where you're going to have millions of new eating disorders. And that's what scares me because it's really hard. It's hard to live with. It's hard to recover from.
Yes.
I just feel like in general, disordered eating, and I know they're two different things, but it just needs to be talked about more because so many people are suffering and so many people don't necessarily understand how debilitating it is. Overall, and this is a very broad question, but what are you hoping that readers, in general, take away from your book, and what did you want to get out of it?
Yeah, well, so for people who have eating disorders, I want them to know that they are not alone and that recovery, no matter how far gone you are, because there were times where I said to myself, it doesn't matter now because I'm so far gone that no one could ever help me. So for people with eating disorders, I want them to know that they're not alone and that no matter how far gone you feel like you are, you can make a full total recovery. For people who don't have eating disorders, I want them to understand what happens in the mind of somebody who has an eating disorder and what your thought process around food is that it's not so simple as let me take you out. Let me make you a turkey burger. It's not that simple. I wanted them to understand how nuanced and complex this issue is, how it can develop, how it can start with my grandparents in 30 something on a train in Russia and translate to where I am now sitting in my house in New Jersey, So I want people to understand what happens because
Thank you. I have to say thank you.
Yeah.
What you're saying,
yes, please.
What you just said is so important. Thank you for making a difference. Honestly, thank you for writing your book. Thank you for trying to heal and help.
I don't know. I feel like, Mom, at least you and I have always said that sharing, if like if sharing our lived experiences can help even one person that's going through something similar, then that's worth it.
Yeah,
and
for sure. It's been very
I don't know,
worth
from
it.
me to you, like I just feel like you're going to help millions of people.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank
and thank you for being here.
Thank you, guys.
And your book is just so inspiring.
Thank
and
you.
I mean, we could continue to talk for 5 more hours,
Right.
truly.
And I'm just going to say,
well, thank you for having me.
I want to hold it up and say Jackie's book, The Weight of Beautiful, is now, is out. It's been out for a while. Get your copy. It's beyond moving. And like I said in the beginning of this podcast, it's not just for people with an eating disorder or disordered eating. It's about strength and vulnerability. And there's something relatable to anyone that would read it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Jackie's book, The Weight of Beautiful, is now out. Get yourself a copy. It's beyond moving. And if you or someone you know is battling an eating disorder, please contact the National Eating Disorders Association, NEDA, at 1-800-931-2237 or go to nationaleatingdisorders.org.
And that's today's episode. We truly hope that this was as meaningful for you as it was for us. So thank you all.
We're always just a DM away on Instagram or TikTok. So please stay in touch and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a beat.
And in the meantime, keep being real, keep being you,
and know that we've got your back.
If you have any thoughts, questions, or just want to say hi, we would love to hear from you. Your support means everything to us. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Chasing Red Flags Official and on Facebook and YouTube at Chasing Red Flags. And if you want to share your story, ask a question, or pick up some Chasing Red Flags merch, go to ChasingRedFlags.com. The Chasing Red Flags podcast is produced by Jay Del Turco. We are new in this space, so if you enjoyed what you're hearing, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or add a comment and like on our YouTube channel.